welcome to the Legal Growth Podcast, where we dive into the strategies, challenges, and success stories helping the future of law firms to shape. I'm your host, Aaron Fulk, and together with Legal Growth Partners, we'll bring you in-depth conversations with top legal professionals, industry innovators, and firm leaders. Our goal is simple: share practical insights, innovative strategies, and real-world advice to help your law firm scale, adapt, and thrive. Whether you're navigating growth challenges or looking to boost your business development, you are in the right place. Let's dive in. Today, our guest is Julie Samuels. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks, Aaron.
And this is your very first podcast. You just
told
offline, and I'm so excited to be your first.
Me too.
So let us know, how did you get into law, and the type of law that you decided to go into?
Well, I actually didn't choose the law. I was a theater major at NYU. And when I graduated, I started working for a theatrical producer. And after a couple of years, I was having, what every young 20-year-old person starts wondering: what am I doing with my life? And my boss said, you should go into the law. And because I was negotiating contracts for him, and I was helping him mount productions globally and even locally at times, and dealing with royalties and all sorts of things having to do with productions. And so I did. I went to law school. I went to New York Law School at night, and continued working full time during the day for the producer. So that was the start. It's a very non-traditional way to get into the law, actually.
I love that.
Yeah. When students come up to me and see my resume and think, oh, I want to do what you're doing, how did you do it? It's not a straight line by any stretch. And I don't know that I really have very useful guidance on that, but it really is about networking. And it happened that I knew I worked for the right person. So it was very helpful in that regard. He really set me up for life in that way. The kind of law that I do is really that of a generalist. I spent my life working in-house, first at New York City Opera, where I ended up being General Counsel, in fact. And then I worked at Condé Nast in the Rights and Permissions group, where I wasn't practicing law per se, but it certainly came in handy because I was working with photographer, illustrator, writer contracts every day. And at Artsy, I ended at senior counsel there, where I really was a generalist. Artsy is an online e-commerce platform for the buying and selling of art. Oh, cool. And it required really knowing a lot about a lot, or jack of all trades, if you will. So I really had my hand in a lot of things, and that's what I continue to enjoy doing at this day, except now I'm kind of in-house for hire. And so I touch on MSAs, NDAs, dispute resolution, IP, website legal policies, employment agreements, anything that I have experience in, I work on.
So you're like a fractional in-house for hire?
Is that? Yeah, I've never heard that expression, but yes. Yeah, I really am. And I can either be engaged for, and in fact, that's how I started at Artsy. I started as a contract attorney when they needed some additional assistance. And I think I was 8 hours a week, and whatever the senior counsel at the time wasn't able to manage, I took over. And I ended up doing at Artsy, even privacy. I handled GDPR and CCPA, and was even the person who handled the data breach. They had a data breach when I was there, and the general counsel at the time had to be out of town, so I was boots on the ground for that as well.
Oh, wow.
So it's been an interesting career, certainly.
Quick question. I just put a kid through the entire theater school. My kiddo, I told you, was living in New York. We did the theater school audition process.
Yeah.
Harder to get, this is so niche right now. We're getting so niche. Was it harder to get into law school or theater school?
Definitely. Well, that's a really good question. theater school because I had to give an audition and I wasn't an actor. I always wanted to be behind the scenes. So I started out in the stage management production track. I was, NYU has studios. So I was at Playwrights Horizons, and I never intended to be a performer, and I had to give an audition, and my SATs were horrifically bad. That being said, I think law school was probably harder because one, at the time that I was applying for law school, I was also in a really terrible personal relationship, and actually broke off my engagement during my first year, but which is a separate podcast.
All the podcasts right now.
We can talk about that later, Aaron. We'll go offline. We'll chat. But I also, the LSATs were just brutal at the time. Remember, I was doing college in the 80s and law school in the 90s. So I don't know what the process is now. We're so far removed from how I did it. But I would probably say law school was more difficult.
Yeah, that's interesting. We'll talk about that. I've always thought law school was difficult, and then I did the theater school. I think they're both very difficult. So props.
Of course they are. Of course
they
are. Without question.
Especially that NYU school. That is difficult.
Well, and the competition is absolutely fierce. And
it really
if you can't tap dance with a banana on your head, and you're a member of 47 different clubs, and you got straight A's plus, then I don't know how kids do it these days.
Oh, I mean, we had to hire a coach. It was a whole thing. We can go in. We'll do a different theater meets law podcast one day.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was interesting. I'd love to hear your stories. I'll tell you what we went through. Okay, so first of all, this is fascinating to me because going to law school is a ton of actual educational stuff, right? A lot of times, but you don't learn so much the business stuff till you're out there doing it. So every attorney actually has a memorable first case once they finally practice the law, right? Can you share one of your first memorable cases, whether it was funny or something you learned a lot?
I don't know that I have a first case because the way I've worked has never been focused on that quite as much. I not to bring down the tone of the room. I think that, working at City Opera during 9/11 was a particularly challenging time, particularly because the gala was to have been that night, the annual gala, which is a huge fundraiser for any performing arts organization.
It was supposed to be the night of 9/11?
Yeah. And it was, I believe, the first $1 million+ fundraiser for New York City Opera, which at the time was massive. And so, there had to be a very quick turnaround time because, it's hard. The memories of it are chaotic and yet crystal clear. But we had to look at all of the contracts for that night and determine what money could be gotten back, if any, how are we going to move forward with it? And at the time, I wasn't negotiating the contracts. The individual business groups were negotiating them. So development had handled a majority of them. And guess what they didn't have? They didn't have force majeure clauses. So it proved extraordinarily challenging because not only did we want the money that we had paid back because we needed that because the gala couldn't go forward, but the vendors wanted to keep the money because we weren't going to pay them the balance. It was an interesting time. It taught me a lot. It taught me never to not have a force majeure clause in a contract again. And certainly once COVID came around, people still weren't considering them in their agreements. So, I think my career has been marked by certain events that we've had to, that I've played a role in managing, and from a legal perspective. So I think that's That's the best way for me to answer that, because not being a litigator, for example, I don't have one that says, well, I went in and I won $14 gazillion for my client. I don't have that. I successfully negotiate copyright infringement claims, and I'm a good negotiator and all of that. But I think it's those key moments that really stand out for me.
That is so interesting, for two reasons. One, also everybody was doing that while still probably knowing someone that was directly involved somehow, right? So while they were grieving, I think about that. And then I also think about the fact that I almost think we're going to see a resurgence of that in the small business world. Hopefully not with the major trauma attached, but with AI writing contracts, they're not putting that in there, right?
That's a later, if we hit all the bullet points you sent me, that's
you got that one
that we need to talk about.
That's where my mind immediately went to. I'm like, oh,
yeah.
Okay. So what has been your biggest growth success story so far?
Sorry, I just discovered a cuticle, which is so annoying. It really is starting my own company. So, I've been working a long time, and I've been laid off twice for restructuring, reorg. And once it was kind of a mutual decision. It was me initiating a conversation and the company saying, let's figure out your exit strategy. When that happened, I decided I was at an age where going back into corporate didn't work for me any longer.
Right.
I didn't think I had in me another round of, are they going to let me go in this next round of layoffs? I just couldn't fathom having that experience again. So I actually started Peppercorn when I got laid off from Condé Nast, more as a side hustle kind of thing, just saying to people, look, I'm doing this. If you need a contract reviewed, throw it my way. I'll charge you a couple of bucks. It'll be great. Yeah. And then when I left Artsy, it really was, no, this needs to be my full-time gig. And I thankfully had a very supportive, at the time he was a partner and became my husband. And who was very supportive of it because he was seeing how unhappy I was. And, I just happened to start it legally, officially at the beginning of COVID. So, so both my marriage and Peppercorn were made official within March of 2020. It was.
Well, everyone was getting divorced. You were getting married and starting a business. I love that.
Yeah, it was a key moment for so many of us.
I love that. And so did you ever see yourself as an entrepreneur, and how has that gone?
Oh gosh, never, ever, ever, ever. Never did I think so. I never wanted to work at a firm. That was never interesting to me. And an entrepreneur, my dad was so successful in his work. And I really grew up with this idea that I had to achieve. And at times that's been a very harmful approach to things. And at times it's really motivated me, but at no point did I ever think I'm going to do it on my own.
Right.
And I've learned a great deal doing it on my own. The first thing that I learned was, I don't care what money you have, find a bookkeeper. That you can't do it yourself. You cannot. Don't try. Don't learn. Don't learn QuickBooks. Don't, you can't do it.
The worst.
It was an interesting moment to actually know what I don't know. Hiring good people to be my support team. And figuring out what network I wanted to have to help support Peppercorn.
Oh, I like that. The smartest woman I ever know. She had 5 kids and she was a VP of a huge company. And when I started my company, right before I started my company, I asked her to lunch and I said, how do you do all the things? And she said, I outsource everything I absolutely can. Yeah. And I've always functioned like that.
Without question.
Because there's people that like to do the things that are not our skill set.
No, and I do my own invoicing, and tomorrow's the 1st of the month, and I have to do my invoices, and it's my least favorite part of the job is collecting money. And I really absolutely hate that. And I haven't outsourced that at this time.
Well, the money part's hard because you have to really trust somebody.
You have to really trust somebody, and you also have to be good to your word. If you say to someone, if you don't pay me by X, I'm discontinuing my engagement, you have to do it. You can't, and I currently have a client who is on strike 3. I've ended the engagement twice, and they've come back to me and said, please, please, please. And I set out my final terms for it. And we'll see if they can live up to the terms. And if they can't, then I've said, this is it. I actually put in the email, this is Major League Ball, which I've never used a sports metaphor. I mean, I like sports, but I've never used a sports metaphor in an email before.
Sometimes you got to talk to men through sports. Jeez, I've learned. All right, really quick, last question. I'm going to, instead of skipping ahead, because you're going to say AI, we already kind of dove into that. I find it so interesting, your background, so I'm going to end with this one. Sure. What is your favorite non-legal skill that has actually surprised you while running your firm?
How much I have to trust my gut.
Yeah.
How much I have to trust my gut. It is, if I could teach anyone anything, it is to nurture the voice that we all have inside of ourselves, and really listen to it. And 9 times out of 10 for me, it's the right call. And when I don't listen to it, I get burned. So it really is, I've been licensed since 1990. I don't know. It's the early 90s. I can't remember, but I've been licensed for, 30 some odd years at this point. I've done a lot. And, all of those things live inside of me, and I have to listen to it. So that's really the one that I would encourage every person in any situation, particularly in contract negotiations, to really hang on to.
Do that. There's nothing worse than I knew it, right? Afterwards. You know what? This has been, I do a lot of these podcasts, and I think this is one of my very favorites ever.
Oh, very kind.
So I'm going to make sure everybody hears it. I think you did so amazing for your very first podcast ever.
Thank you. Have me back. We'll talk about other things.
I know. I want to. We're gonna talk offline. I have so many ideas.
Good.
Okay, so thank you for joining us on the Legal Growth Podcast presented by Legal Growth Partners. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe, drop us a review, share it with your colleagues, because great insights are even better when shared. For more tips and tools to help grow your practice, visit legalgrowthpartners.com. Until next time, keep innovating, keep growing, and keep smiling. And thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.